The bridge of the Eternal Dawn hummed with quiet activity. Commander Taemin stood before the main viewing screen, watching the blue-green planet grow larger as they approached. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. "Report," Taemin said without turning around. Captain Sora looked up from her science station. "The planet matches the data we received, sir. Third planet from a yellow star. Signs of primitive civilization. Across most continents, radio signals suggest basic technology. How basic? Chemical rockets, simple computers. They appear to have achieved limited space flight, but nothing beyond their immediate orbital space." Sora paused, checking her readings again. "Sir, they call themselves humans." Taemin nodded. "Another new species to add to the hegemony's vast catalog." In his 20 years of service, he had overseen first contact with dozens of alien races. Most followed the same pattern: fear, wonder, confusion, then eventual acceptance of the hegemony's authority. Some tried to resist, but that never lasted long. "Any signs of advanced weapons?" asked Yunji from the tactical station. "Negative. Primitive nuclear weapons at best. Nothing that could threaten us." Sora's voice carried the same boredom that filled most first contact missions. "Standard integration protocols should apply." Taemin finally turned from the screen. "Very well. Signal the fleet. We'll begin with standard observation procedures. I want complete scans of their military capabilities and population centers." The Eternal Dawn was not alone. 3 other ships of the hegemony fleet hung in space nearby, their dark hulls almost invisible against the stars. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. Each crew was trained in the delicate art of bringing new species into the fold of galactic civilization. At his communication station, Jae-sung raised his hand. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet." "Already?" Taemin frowned. Most species took days or weeks to detect their presence, even longer to attempt communication. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed a small station orbiting the blue planet. It looked crude, assembled from basic metals and what appeared to be repurposed rocket parts. A figure appeared on screen, clearly one of the humans. The being had smooth skin, dark hair, and wore simple clothing. It looked remarkably similar to several other species they had encountered, though with subtle differences. What struck Taemin most was the human's expression. There was no fear, no shock, no wonder. The human simply looked at them with calm interest. "Greetings," the human said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Dr. Ha-Neul Kim. Welcome to our solar system." Silence filled the bridge. Galactic Standard was a complex language that took most species years to learn, even with translation technology. Yet this human spoke it as if born to it. "How do you know our language?" Taemin asked carefully. Dr. Ha-Neul smiled. "We've been listening to the galaxy's radio chatter for quite some time. Your language isn't difficult once you understand the basic patterns." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Though I'm curious why you chose to announce yourselves so formally. Most visitors prefer a more subtle approach." "Most visitors?" Taemin felt a cold touch of unease. "What other visitors?" "Oh, you're the first in several thousand years," Ha-Neul said casually. "We were beginning to wonder if anyone would remember this little corner of space." Captain Sora leaned forward in her chair. "Dr. Kim, our records show no previous contact with your species, no evidence of interstellar travel from this system." "That's correct. We haven't left home in quite some time." Ha-Neul's smile grew warmer. "But you've made such wonderful progress since the last time. Your ships are beautiful. I can see influences from at least 6 different design traditions. The Corvani hull curves, Zelthian power distribution, even some early Vorthon shield. Harmonics. Your ancestors were always quick learners." "Ancestors?" Taemin felt the unease growing stronger. "Dr. Kim, I think there may be some confusion." The hegemony of United Worlds has existed for over 10,000 years. Our records of galactic history are quite complete. Are they? Hanul looked genuinely curious. How far back do your oldest records go? Jae Sung checked his console quickly. Approximately 12,000 years, to the founding of the first interstellar alliances. Ah. Hanul nodded as if that explained everything. Yes, that would be just after the Great Silence. Most records from before that time were lost, weren't they? The Great Silence was mentioned in their oldest histories, a mysterious period, when galactic civilization apparently collapsed and had to be rebuilt. But the records from that time were fragmentary at best, mostly myths and legends. Dr. Kim, Taemin said slowly, are you claiming your species has records from before the Great Silence? We have more than records, Hanul said simply. We have memories. Yunji moved her hand closer to her weapons console. Commander, I recommend we proceed with extreme caution. This could be some kind of deception. Hanul apparently heard her, despite the supposedly closed communication channel. There's no deception here, Commander, and there's no need for weapons. We're simply happy to see that you've grown up so well. Grown up? Taemin repeated. Your people, Hanul clarified. The children we sent out to rebuild the galaxy. You've done magnificently. Hundreds of worlds, dozens of species living in peace. You've created something beautiful. The bridge fell silent. Children they had sent out. Taemin looked at his crew, seeing his own confusion reflected in their faces. I think, Hanul continued gently, that you should check your oldest archives. The quantum crystals that your archivists keep in the deepest vaults. The ones marked with the ancient warnings. How could she know about those? The ancient archives were classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people in the entire hegemony even knew they existed. Dr. Kim, Taemin said carefully, I think we need to discuss this in person. Would you be willing to come aboard our ship? Hanul laughed, a sound that was surprisingly warm. Oh, Commander, I think it would be better if you came down here. Your ship is impressive, but we have some things to show you that won't fit in your cargo bay. What kind of things? The kind of things that might help you understand who you really are, Hanul said. And more importantly, what's coming? What's coming? Yunji demanded. Hanul's expression grew serious for the first time. The reason we've been waiting. The reason we guided your development for so long. The reason we've been preparing. She looked directly at Taemin through the screen. Commander, your people have done well, but your real test is still ahead. Of you. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Taemin stared at the blank screen for a long moment. In all his years of first contact, he had never encountered anything like this. Species were supposed to be awed by the hegemony's power, grateful for the offer of membership in galactic civilization. They weren't supposed to speak like teachers, addressing former students. Sir? Sora's voice was uncertain. What are your orders? Taemin continued staring at the screen. Everything about this felt wrong. The humans' casual knowledge of their technology, her familiarity with their language, her cryptic references to their past. Most disturbing of all was the way she spoke about them. Not as conquerors or even equals, but as children who had finally come home. Boram, he said finally, addressing the ship's chief archivist. I want you to access the deepest archives. The quantum crystal storage that predates the hegemony. Sir, those archives require council authorization to— Get the authorization, Taemin interrupted. I want to know what's in those crystals. All of it. He turned back to the viewing screen, where the blue planet continued its slow rotation. Somewhere down there, a human was waiting with answers to questions he was only beginning to understand how to ask. And prepare a diplomatic shuttle, he added. It seems we're going visiting. The shuttle bay of the human space station was nothing like what Taemin expected. From the outside, The station looked like a collection of metal tubes and basic components held together by determination and prayer. Inside, however, the walls hummed with energy patterns he didn't recognize. The gravity felt perfectly calibrated, and the air had a freshness that spoke of advanced recycling systems. Dr. Hanul waited for them at the airlock, dressed in simple blue coveralls that looked more like work clothes than diplomatic attire. She greeted them with a warm smile and a slight bow. "Welcome aboard the New Dawn," she said. "I hope your trip down was comfortable." Behind Tae-min, diplomat Jae-sung and military advisor Yoon-ji exchanged glances. The shuttle ride had been more comfortable than expected. Their pilot had reported unusual readings from the station's docking systems, guidance beams more precise than anything in their own technology. "Dr. Kim," Tae-min began formally, "I am Commander Tae-min of the hegemony vessel Eternal Dawn. With me are Jae-sung and Yoon-ji." Hanul finished with a gentle smile. "Yes, we know. We've been watching your approach for several days. Your crew roster makes for interesting reading." Yoon-ji stepped forward, her hand resting near her sidearm. "How exactly have you been watching us? Our ships have the most advanced stealth technology in the galaxy." "Do they?" Hanul looked genuinely curious. "That's wonderful. We're always pleased to see how far the technology has developed." She gestured for them to follow her down a corridor. "Though I have to say, your quantum displacement engines are leaving quite a signature. You might want to recalibrate the harmonic dampeners." Tae-min felt the now familiar chill of unease. Quantum displacement engines were classified technology. The harmonic dampeners were a recent innovation that only the most advanced hegemony engineers understood. "Dr. Kim," he said carefully, "you seem to know a great deal about our technology." "We should," Hanul replied cheerfully. "We designed the first versions." They walked through corridors that looked deceptively simple, but felt somehow vast. The walls seemed to shift slightly when Tae-min wasn't looking directly at them, creating an optical illusion that made the space feel larger than it could possibly be. "Here we are," Hanul said, stopping before a large window that looked out into space. "I thought you might want to see this." The view took Tae-min's breath away. Beyond the window, space was filled with ships, not the crude vessels he had expected. From a primitive civilization, but sleek craft that moved with impossible grace. Some were clearly ancient, their hulls dark with age, while others looked newly constructed. All of them were larger than anything in the hegemony fleet. "How many?" Yoon-ji whispered. "Currently?" "About 3,000 ships in this system alone," Hanul said casually. "Though most are in deep storage, we only keep a few hundred active at any given time. 3,000 ships. The entire hegemony fleet numbered less than 500 vessels, and it had taken millennia to build them." Jae-sung found his voice first. "Dr. Kim, with respect, this changes everything. If your species possesses this level of technology, why haven't you made contact before? Why allow us to believe we were the dominant power in this region of space?" Hanul turned from the window, her expression growing more serious. "Because you weren't ready. Because the galaxy wasn't ready." She gestured to chairs arranged in a small circle. "Please sit. There's a great deal to explain." As they settled into surprisingly comfortable seats, Hanul continued. "Tell me, Commander, what do you know about the species that make up your hegemony?" Tae-min thought for a moment. "We represent 47 different species across 300 systems. Each brings unique abilities and perspectives to our alliance. And they all developed independently?" "Yes, of course. Though we've helped guide less advanced species toward—" Tae-min stopped, something nagging at his memory. "Toward what?" Hanul asked gently. Toward certain technological paths," he finished slowly. "Standard development protocols. We've found that certain sequences of advancement work better than others." Hanul nodded. "And where did those protocols come from?" Jae-sung leaned forward. "They're part of our oldest cultural traditions, passed down from the first founders of the hegemony." "Who learned them from?" Jae-sung paused, frowning. The records aren't clear. The knowledge seems to have existed from the beginning of our recorded history. Hanul stood and walked to what looked like a simple control panel. The moment she touched it, the room around them transformed. The walls became transparent, revealing not the inside of a space station, but what appeared to be a vast command center filled with displays showing star charts, energy readings, and streams of data. "This is our monitoring station," Hanul explained. "We've been watching the galaxy rebuild itself for the past 12,000 years. Every species that achieved spaceflight, every alliance that formed, every conflict that was resolved, we've observed it all." The displays showed familiar star systems, but with additional information overlaying them. Trade routes were marked with flowing lines of light. Population centers pulsed with different colors. Most disturbing of all, there were markers indicating hegemony fleet positions, information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. "You've been spying on us," Yoonji said, her voice tight with anger. "We've been watching over you," Hanul corrected gently. "There's a difference." She touched another control and the display zoomed in on a system Taemin recognized as Corvani space. "Do you remember the Corvani Civil War 300 years ago?" "Of course. The hegemony mediated the peace accords. Do you remember how the peace talks began? Who suggested the initial framework for negotiation?" Taemin thought back to his history lessons. It was suggested by a minor trade delegation. They proposed a solution that both sides could accept. "That trade delegation included a human advisor," Hanul said quietly. "One of our people working under deep cover. The peace framework was based on principles we taught your ancestors millennia ago." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's systems. Taemin stared at the displays, watching the light patterns flow across familiar star charts. Everything he thought he knew about galactic history was starting to crumble. "How long?" he asked finally. "How long have we been watching?" "Since the day your people first achieved faster-than-light travel." "How long have we been guiding?" "Since the day you started building alliances instead of empires." Hanul's voice was soft but firm. "Every major peace treaty, every technological breakthrough that prevented war instead of causing it, every cultural exchange that built understanding, we've been there in the background, making sure things went the right way." Jae-sung shook his head. "But why? Why go to such lengths? Why not reveal yourselves and simply lead?" Hanul's expression grew sad. "Because leading isn't the same as growing. Because we tried that once long ago and it nearly destroyed everything." She gestured to the displays around them. "What you call the Great Silence wasn't a collapse of civilization, Commander. It was a war that consumed most of the galaxy." "What kind of war?" Yoonji asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "The kind that happens when a species becomes too powerful too quickly. When they start to believe they're the most important thing in the universe." Hanul's eyes fixed on Taemin. "The kind of war that we started because we thought we knew what was best for everyone." The displays shifted again, showing older star charts. Systems that no longer existed, marked with symbols that suggested destruction on an unimaginable scale. "We won that war," Hanul continued. "But winning meant losing everything that mattered. Entire species extinct. Whole systems reduced to cosmic dust. Billions of years of evolution erased in a few centuries of conflict." She paused, her voice heavy with memory. "So we made a choice. We would step back. We would guide instead of rule. We would watch and wait until the galaxy was ready to hear the truth." "And now?" Taemin asked. Hanul looked at him with something that might have been hope. "Now you're here. Now you've built something we never managed. A true alliance of equals. Now you might be ready to learn why we've been preparing all this time. Preparing for what?" The displays around them suddenly flared with new information. Energy signatures unlike anything in hegemony databases. Massive objects moving through. Space between galaxies. Warning signals in frequencies that made Taemin's bones ache. For them, Hanul said simply. For the real enemy. The ones who are coming home. Boram had always loved the deep archives. While other crew members found the quantum crystal storage levels cold and unwelcoming, she felt at home among the glowing data cores that held the hegemony's oldest memories. Today, however, the familiar corridors felt different. The crystals seemed brighter, almost eager, as if they had been waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. The authorization from Commander Taemin had come through an hour ago, along with specific instructions, to access crystals that Boram had never been allowed to touch. These were the restricted archives, sealed behind quantum locks and warning labels in ancient languages. Her superior, Archive Director Yeon Ho, had looked pale when he handed her the access codes. Be careful, he had warned. Some of those crystals are older than the hegemony itself. No one knows what's really stored in them. Now Boram stood before the deepest vault, watching as the ancient locks disengaged one by one. The heavy door slid open with a sound like a deep breath, revealing a chamber that felt more like a tomb than a storage facility. The quantum crystals here were different from the ones in the upper levels. Instead of the clean blue light of modern data storage, these pulsed with colors she had never seen before. Deep purples and golds that seemed to shift and flow like living things. She chose the largest crystal first, one marked with symbols that predated any writing system in her databases. As she connected her reading device, the crystal flared to life with an intensity that made her step back. Data began flowing across her screen faster than she could process, but what she could read made no sense. Star charts showing the galaxy in configurations that were billions of years old. Species names in languages that had no translation. Technology descriptions that used principles she didn't recognize. And most disturbing of all, references to something called the Seeders, beings described as the first teachers, the first builders, the ones who shaped the galaxy's destiny before the dawn of recorded time. Boram called up her colleague, cryptographer Hyunwoo, on the comm system. I need you in the deep archives. Level 9, restricted access. Level 9? Hyunwoo's voice cracked slightly. Boram, what exactly are you looking for down there? Answers, she said, still staring at the flowing data. And I think I'm starting to find them. When Hyunwoo arrived 20 minutes later, his expression changed the moment he entered the chamber. The ancient crystals were now fully active, casting shifting patterns of light across the walls. The air itself seemed to hum with energy. By the void, he whispered. How long have these been active? Since I started accessing them. It's like they've been waiting. Boram showed him her screen. Look at this. These aren't just historical records. They're something else. Hyunwoo leaned over her shoulder, reading the translated text. His face grew pale as he processed what he was seeing. These references to the Seeders, Boram, this describes them as having direct influence over the development of every major species in the galaxy. Not just influence, Boram corrected, pulling up another section. According to this, they guided the evolution of intelligence itself. Every species that achieved spaceflight was apparently taught by them, directly or indirectly. That's impossible. The genetic diversity alone. Boram switched to another crystal, this one containing what appeared to be biological data. The information that flowed across her screen made her sit down hard in her chair. Hyunwoo, look! At this genetic analysis, the data showed comparison charts between dozens of species, including their own. But instead of the random diversity expected from independent evolution, there were patterns, shared genetic markers that appeared in every intelligent species, template sequences that were too similar to be coincidental. It's like Hyunwoo struggled with the implications. It's like someone took a base genetic pattern and modified it to create different species while maintaining certain core characteristics. The characteristics needed for intelligence, for cooperation, for the ability to work together across species lines? Boram pulled up more data. According to these records, the Seeders didn't just find intelligent species. They created the potential for intelligence and then guided its development. A new crystal caught her attention, one that pulsed with urgent red light. As she connected to it, alarms began sounding throughout the archive chamber. The data that appeared on her screen was marked with warning symbols and encrypted with security, protocols that were more advanced than anything in current hegemony technology. Warning! Emergency archive activation, the system announced in a voice that didn't sound like any hegemony AI. Threat assessment protocol engaged, searching for authorized personnel. Authorized personnel? Hyunwoo looked around nervously. Boram, I think we should... Access granted, the voice continued. Welcome, children of the third seeding. Your parents have been waiting for your return. The chamber around them transformed. What had appeared to be simple storage walls revealed themselves as massive display screens. Star charts filled the space, showing not just the current galaxy, but projections extending millions of years into the past and future. And there, highlighted in flowing text that appeared in perfect hegemony standard, was the story they had never been told. The Seeders had not been legends. They had been real, and they had been the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. For millions of years, they had guided the development of life itself, nurturing dozens of species toward intelligence and consciousness. They had built a galactic civilization that spanned every habitable world, creating a golden age of peace and prosperity. But the records also showed what had ended that golden age, something called the Hunger, entities from beyond the galactic rim that consumed entire solar systems to fuel their journey between galaxies. The Seeders had fought them for thousands of years before finally driving them back into the void between galaxies. The war almost destroyed us, the ancient voice explained, apparently responding to their thoughts. We were forced to make terrible choices. Entire species were sacrificed to build the weapons needed to fight the hunger. Whole systems were evacuated and converted into fortress worlds. Boram stared at the displays, watching simulations of battles on scales she could barely comprehend. Ships the size of moons exchanging fire that could crack planets. Weapons that manipulated space and time itself. And through it all, the slow retreat of the Seeders as they fell back toward a small blue world in an unremarkable system. Earth, Hyunwoo breathed. The final sanctuary, the voice confirmed. When the war ended and the hunger was driven back, we faced a choice. We could rebuild our empire and wait for their inevitable return, or we could try something different. We could plant seeds throughout the galaxy and guide them to grow into something stronger than we had ever been. The displays showed the Seeders' final plan. Small groups sent out to distant worlds, carrying with them the knowledge and genetic templates needed to nurture new civilizations. Each group would work in secret, guiding their adopted species toward intelligence and cooperation, while never revealing their true nature. Your ancestors were some of our finest students, the voice continued. We gave them our ships, our knowledge, and our blessing to rebuild civilization among the stars. But we also gave them something more important. The wisdom to build alliances instead of empires, to cooperate instead of conquer. Boram felt tears streaming down her face as she understood the magnitude of what she was seeing. Every aspect of hegemony culture that she valued, their commitment to peaceful exploration, their respect for other species, their focus on cooperation over domination. All of it had been carefully planted and nurtured by beings who loved them enough to let them believe they had discovered these values on their own. But why reveal this now? She asked aloud. The displays shifted, showing new data. Energy signatures detected at the edge of the galaxy. Massive objects moving through intergalactic space. Warning signals in frequencies that made the very walls of the chamber vibrate. Because the hunger is returning, the voice said simply. And this time, you must be ready to fight them not as our students, but as our equals." The crystal she was connected to pulsed one final time, downloading something directly into her personal data storage. When the light faded, she found herself holding more information than she could process in a lifetime. Star charts, weapon designs, tactical analyses, and most importantly, the location of every hidden human outpost in the galaxy. "Take this to your commander," the voice said, as the chamber began to return to its normal appearance. "Tell him that the children have grown up beautifully, and now it's time to come home." As Boram and Hyunwoo gathered their equipment with shaking hands, the ancient crystals dimmed back to their normal glow. But the knowledge they had revealed could never be hidden again. The galaxy was about to learn who had really been watching over them all these years, and more importantly, why. The shuttle that carried Ambassador Dong-hyun to Earth's surface was unlike anything he had seen before. Dr. Ha-Nul had insisted they use human transportation, and what appeared to be a simple atmospheric craft had descended from orbit in perfect silence, its hull shimmering with energy patterns that defied every law of physics he knew. Now, as they glided over Earth's blue oceans toward their destination, Dong-hyun found himself struggling to process what he was seeing. The planet looked primitive from space. Scattered cities, basic infrastructure, technology that appeared centuries behind hegemony standards. But the closer they got, the more things didn't add up. "Those energy readings," murmured engineer Yu-Na, from the seat beside him. "They're coming from underwater installations, massive ones." Dr. Ha-Nul, piloting the craft with casual ease, smiled at her observation. "You have good sensors. Most visitors don't notice the deep facilities until we show them directly." "How deep?" Dong-hyun asked. "The main Pacific installation extends about 40 kilometers down. The Atlantic facility is smaller, only 20 kilometers. Ha-Nul spoke as if she were discussing the weather. "We found that deep ocean construction disturbs the surface ecosystem less, 40 kilometers underwater. The hegemony's most advanced construction projects rarely went deeper than a few hundred meters. The pressure alone should have made such depths impossible to work in, even with their best technology. They descended toward what looked like a small island, barely visible above the waves. As they approached, however, the water around the island began to shimmer and part, revealing structures that had been hidden beneath the surface. Towers of crystalline material rose from the ocean floor, connected by flowing bridges that pulsed with soft light. The island itself was merely the tip of a construction that disappeared into the depths. "Welcome to Pacific Station," Ha-Nul said as they touched down on a landing platform that materialized from what had appeared to be empty water. "One of our smaller facilities." Smaller facilities. Dong-hyun exchanged glances with Yu-Na, seeing his own disbelief reflected in her expression. The structure they were walking through was larger than the hegemony's primary shipyards, and it was apparently one of the minor installations. Dr. Ha-Nul led them through corridors that seemed to flow and shift around them. The walls were made of some transparent material that showed the ocean beyond, with schools of earthfish swimming past in the filtered sunlight. But embedded in those same walls were devices that Yu-Na recognized as quantum processors, each one more advanced than anything in their computer banks. "Dr. Kim," Yu-Na said, stopping to examine one of the wall-mounted devices. "This appears to be a quantum computer capable of calculating faster-than-light navigation in real time." "Oh, yes," Ha-Nul agreed cheerfully. "We use them for weather, monitoring mostly. Sometimes for tracking fish migrations. The navigation calculations are just a side function." Weather monitoring. Yu-Na felt her understanding of technology gaps shifting in ways that made her dizzy. A quantum computer that could navigate starships was being used to predict rain patterns. They took what Ha-Nul called an elevator, though it felt more like falling gently through water. As they descended, the walls became increasingly transparent, revealing the true scale of the installation. Level after level extended downward, each one filled with equipment and activity. Humans moved through the facilities with practiced efficiency, operating technology that looked like it belonged in a museum of impossible things. "How long?" Dong-hyun asked quietly. "How long have we been building this?" "About 8,000 years. For this particular installation, though we've been upgrading it regularly." Hanul paused the elevator at what appeared to be an observation deck. "Would you like to see the archives?" The archives turned out to be a chamber that defied geometry. From the outside, it looked like a modest room with basic furniture. Inside, it stretched in all directions beyond the horizon, filled with floating displays that showed information from across the galaxy. Star charts updated in real time, population data from worlds Dong-hyun recognized, even technical specifications for hegemony ships that shouldn't have been available to anyone outside their military. But it was the historical displays that made him sit down heavily in one of the provided chairs. Images of events he had studied in school but shown from perspectives no historian had ever seen. The formation of the first interstellar alliances, recorded from hidden observation posts. The development of faster-than-light travel, with detailed notes about how human advisors had guided the breakthrough. The peaceful resolution of dozens of conflicts, each one showing the subtle influence of carefully placed humans working behind the scenes. "We've been documenting everything," explained Ji-won, another human who had joined them in the archives. Unlike Hanul's simple coveralls, he wore robes that seemed to shimmer with embedded technology. Every species that achieved spaceflight, every cultural development that promoted cooperation over conflict, every technological breakthrough that made the galaxy safer rather than more dangerous. Yuna was studying a display that showed the technical evolution of starship design. "These development paths, they're not natural. Someone guided these innovations." "Guilty as charged," Ji-won said with a gentle smile. "Though we prefer to think of it as teaching rather than guiding. We would identify species with potential, then introduce concepts through various means. Trade missions, cultural exchanges, sometimes just leaving the right information where curious minds would find it." Dong-hyun found himself looking at a display showing his own homeworld during its early space age. The breakthrough that had led to their first starships was documented here in detail, including notes about the human scientist who had worked alongside their own researchers under a false identity. "Dr. Sarah Chen," he read aloud, his voice hollow with recognition. "She was considered one of our greatest innovators. She developed the theoretical framework for our FTL drive." "Sarah was one of our best field operatives," Hanul said softly. "She spent 40 years on your world, helping your people develop the technology they needed to reach the stars safely. She considered it her greatest honor." "Was she even human?" "Oh yes, completely human. Just very, very well trained." Hanul gestured to other displays showing similar operations across the galaxy. "We have had people embedded in every major spacefaring civilization for thousands of years. Scientists, artists, philosophers, sometimes just ordinary citizens who happen to be in the right place to nudge history in a better direction. The scope of it was overwhelming. Not just one or two interventions, but a sustained effort across millennia to guide the development of galactic civilization. Every peaceful treaty, every technological advancement that prevented war, every cultural breakthrough that promoted understanding between species, all of it carefully orchestrated by humans working in secret." "Why?" Yuna asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why go to such effort? Why not simply reveal yourselves and lead?" Ji-won's expression grew serious. "Because we tried that once. Because direct rule, no matter how benevolent, creates dependence rather than growth. Because the galaxy needed to learn to stand on its own." He gestured to a display that showed older star charts, systems that no longer existed. "Our first attempt at guiding galactic civilization was very different. We ruled. Directly, made decisions for everyone, solved problems with our superior technology. And it nearly destroyed everything. The displays shifted to show images of war on a scale that dwarfed anything in recorded history. Ships the size of planets exchanging fire that shattered moons, weapons that consumed entire star systems to fuel themselves. And through it all, the slow retreat of an ancient civilization as it fell back toward a small blue world. The Devourers, Ha-Nul said simply. They came from beyond the galactic rim, consuming everything in their path to fuel their journey between galaxies. We fought them for thousands of years, but the war required us to become something we never wanted to be. What do you mean? Dong-hyun asked. We became conquerors, Ji-won replied. To build the weapons needed to fight them, we had to strip mine entire systems. To feed our war machine, we had to conscript whole species. To win, we had to become almost as destructive as the enemy we were fighting. The displays showed the aftermath of that ancient war. Systems reduced to cosmic debris, entire species extinct, a galaxy scarred by conflict on a scale that made the great silence of recorded history look like a minor dispute. So when we finally drove them back, Ha-Nul continued, we made a different choice. Instead of rebuilding our empire, we would plant seeds throughout the galaxy. We would guide rather than rule, teach rather than command. We would help the galaxy grow into something stronger than we had ever been. Yuna stared at the displays, showing the careful cultivation of dozens of species over millions of years. And it worked. Beyond our greatest hopes, Ji-won agreed. The hegemony represents something we never achieved, a true alliance of equals, species working together by choice rather than compulsion. You've built the foundation for a galactic civilization stronger than anything that came before. Foundation? Dong-hyun caught the word that chilled him. You speak as if this is just the beginning. The displays around them suddenly flared with new information. N.A. The emergency council meeting aboard the Eternal Dawn had been going for 3 hours, and the arguing showed no signs of stopping. Commander Tae-min sat at the head of the conference table, watching his senior staff tear themselves apart over revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. This is clearly some form of elaborate deception, Military Commander Sang-ho said for the 5th time, his voice tight with anger. These humans want us to believe they're our ancient benefactors, so we'll lower our guard. It's the oldest trick in warfare. The evidence is overwhelming, Captain Sora countered, gesturing to the holographic displays that filled the center of the table. The genetic markers alone prove that every species in the hegemony shares common design elements. The probability of that happening naturally is essentially 0. Evidence can be fabricated, Sang-ho shot back. Advanced holographic technology, false genetic data, carefully constructed historical records, all of it could be an elaborate trap. Scholar Min-ho leaned forward, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke. Commander Sang-ho, I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing the archive data that Bo-Ram and Hyun-woo retrieved. The quantum crystals themselves are older than our civilization. The encryption methods used are beyond our current technology to fake. Either these humans possess capabilities so far beyond ours that resistance is meaningless, or they're telling the truth. If they're so powerful, Sang-ho demanded, why reveal themselves now? Why not continue their supposed guidance from the shadows? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Ha-Nul's voice filled the conference room as she joined the meeting through their communication system. Somehow, she had accessed their supposedly secure channel without any of their technicians detecting the intrusion. Because hiding is no longer an option, she said simply. Because the time for preparation is ending, and the time for action has begun. Sang-ho was on his feet instantly, his hand moving toward his weapon. How are you accessing this channel? This is a secure military frequency. Commander Sang-ho, Hanul's voice carried a note of gentle amusement. "You're secure. Frequencies are based on quantum encryption algorithms that we developed 12,000 years ago. We helped design the security protocols your people use." The holographic displays in the room shifted without anyone touching the controls. New information appeared, technical specifications for hegemony communication systems, complete with detailed notes about their development history. Each innovation was traced back to its origin, showing the careful introduction of concepts through human advisors working under various identities. "This is impossible," Sang-Ho whispered, staring at documentation of his own military academy. Training. There, listed among his instructors, was a tactical warfare professor named Dr. Marcus Webb, identified in the human records as Agent Designation Shepard 7, embedded in hegemony military education for the past 30 years. "Dr. Webb has been one of our most successful long-term operatives," Hanul confirmed, apparently reading Sang-Ho's thoughts from his expression. "His courses in cooperative combat tactics have influenced an entire generation of hegemony officers. The strategies you've used to build alliances instead of conquering enemies, he helped develop the theoretical framework for those approaches." Diplomat In-Soo spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "Dr. Kim, assuming your claims are true, what exactly do you want from us? What is the purpose of this revelation?" "Partnership," Hanul replied immediately. "True partnership between equals. We're done hiding, done guiding from the shadows. What's coming requires us to work together openly." The displays shifted again, showing long-range sensor data that made everyone in the room fall silent. Energy signatures were approaching the galaxy from intergalactic space, massive objects moving at significant fractions of light speed. The projected arrival time was less than 10 years. "The Devourers," Minho breathed, recognizing the designation from the ancient archives. "They've been traveling for 12,000 years, Hanul confirmed. Ever since we drove them out of this galaxy. They've had time to grow, to evolve, to develop new technologies. They're returning stronger than they were before." Captain Sora studied the sensor readings with professional interest. "Their ships, they're enormous. Some of them appear to be larger than our space stations. The largest ones are converted. Star systems," Hanul said matter-of-factly. "They consume entire solar systems and reshape the matter into mobile weapons platforms. What you're seeing are just the scouts." "How many?" Taemin asked quietly. "Current estimates suggest approximately 50,000 vessels of various sizes. The main fleet will arrive in waves over a period of several years." Hanul paused. "We estimate they'll begin their assault on the Outer Rim colonies within the decade." 50,000 ships. The number was beyond comprehension. The entire hegemony fleet would be outnumbered 100 to 1. "We don't stand a chance," In-Soo said, his diplomatic composure finally cracking. "Alone?" "No," Hanul agreed. "Together, we might." The displays shifted to show new information. Defense plans on a galactic scale. Not just the human fleet they had seen at Earth, but installations throughout the galaxy. Hidden bases in asteroid fields. Weapons platforms disguised as space stations. And most shocking of all, cooperative defense networks that included species the hegemony had never encountered. "There are others," Taemin realized. 43 species across 17 galaxies, Hanul confirmed. All of them developed through programs similar to what we did here. All of them facing the same threat. The Devourers aren't just returning to this galaxy. They're returning everywhere to reclaim all the territory they once held. Scholar Minho leaned forward intently. "You're describing an intergalactic alliance. Species from different galaxies, working together." "We're describing survival," Hanul corrected. "The Devourers don't negotiate, don't take prisoners, don't leave anything behind that could grow into a threat. They consume everything and move on. The only way to stop them is to be stronger than they are." Sang-Ho slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him. What do you need from us? Everything, Hanul said simply. Your fleets, your resources, your people, but more than that, we need your trust. We need you to believe that the species you've spent millennia bringing together can work alongside us as equals, not as students following teachers. And if we refuse, Insu asked, then you'll face the Devourers alone, and this galaxy will become another dead zone in their vast territory. Hanul's voice carried no threat, only sadness. We've seen it happen before. Civilizations that couldn't bring themselves to cooperate fully, species that let pride or fear prevent them from working together. The Devourers consume them systematically, one system at a time. The conference room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Everyone stared at the displays, showing the approaching threat, trying to process the magnitude of what they were facing. There's something else, Hanul said gently. Something you need to understand before you make your decision. The displays shifted one final time, showing genetic analysis data that made Captain Sora gasp in recognition. These genetic markers, they're not just in the hegemony species. They're in the Devourers, too. The Devourers were our first attempt at creating a space-faring civilization, Hanul said quietly. Millions of years ago, before we learned the difference between guidance and control. We made them too aggressive, too focused on expansion and consumption. When we tried to correct our mistakes, they turned on us. The full horror of the situation became clear. The approaching enemy wasn't just an alien threat. They were humanity's greatest failure, returning to destroy everything their creators had built since. They're coming home, Taman said slowly. Yes, Hanul confirmed, and they're very, very angry. The decision that would shape the future of the galaxy was made not in a grand council chamber or military command center, but in the quiet observation lounge of the Eternal Dawn. Commander Tamin stood alone before the great viewing window, watching Earth turn slowly in the darkness of space. Behind him, the soft footsteps of his crew members told him he was no longer alone. One by one, they had come to him over the past 6 hours. Captain Sora, with her scientific analysis confirming every impossible claim the humans had made. Scholar Minho, with historical evidence that rewrote everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. Engineer Yuna, with technical specifications that proved human technology was centuries ahead of anything the hegemony possessed. Even military commander Sang Ho had eventually arrived, his proud bearing diminished but not broken. Sir, he had said simply, I've reviewed the tactical data. If we fight alone, we lose. If we fight together, we might have a chance. Now they waited in comfortable silence, watching the blue world that had become the center of their universe. In a few hours, the emergency session of the Hegemony Council would begin. Representatives from 47 worlds would gather to hear evidence that would challenge every assumption their civilization was built on. Commander, Captain Sora said softly, the early warning stations are reporting new contacts. Tai Min turned from the window. The Devourers? No, sir. Ships from the Outer Rim colonies. Word is spreading faster than we anticipated. Sora paused, checking her display. It appears that human operatives across the galaxy are revealing themselves simultaneously. Every major world in the hegemony is receiving the same information we did. Of course they were. The humans had spent thousands of years building this moment, preparing for the day when secrecy would no longer serve their purposes. They wouldn't leave something this important to chance or politics. How are they responding? Taemin asked. Mixed reactions, Scholar Minho reported from his communication station. Some worlds are demanding immediate military action against Earth. Others are requesting emergency sessions to review the historical evidence. The Corvani Council has already voted to accept the Human Alliance proposal. The Corvani. Taemin wasn't surprised. They had always been among the most cooperative members of the hegemony, quick to see the benefits of working together rather than competing. If the humans had guided their development as claimed, they had done an excellent job. Sir, engineer, Yuna called from her technical station. I'm receiving a transmission from Dr. Kim. She's requesting permission to address the crew directly. Taemin nodded. Put her through to the ship-wide communication system. Dr. Ha-Nul's voice filled every corridor and compartment of the Eternal Dawn. Crew of the hegemony vessel Eternal Dawn. This is Dr. Ha-Nul Kim speaking from Earth. I know that many of you are confused and frightened by the revelations of the past few days. I know that learning the truth about your history and your origins has challenged everything you believed about yourselves. The ship fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. In cargo bays and engineering sections, crew members stopped their work to listen. In the medical bay, off-duty personnel gathered around communication panels. I want you to know, Ha-Nul continued, that everything you have accomplished, every alliance you have built, every peaceful solution you have found to seemingly impossible problems, all of that came from within you. We may have provided guidance, but the wisdom to choose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear, hope over despair, that was yours. Taemin found himself thinking of the dozens of first contact missions he had led, the careful diplomacy required to bring new species into the hegemony peacefully. Had that skill been taught to him by human advisors, or had it grown from something deeper? The galaxy you have built together represents the best of what civilization can become. Ha-Nul's voice continued. Species working as equals, sharing knowledge and resources, solving problems through discussion rather than warfare. It is everything we dreamed of when we began this long experiment in guidance and patience. On his display, Taemin could see similar ships appearing throughout the solar system. Not just hegemony vessels, but craft from species he had never seen before. The humans had been busy while their delegation was on Earth. But now that Golden Age faces its greatest test, Ha-Nul said, her voice growing more serious. The enemy that destroyed our first attempt at galactic civilization is returning. They are stronger than before, more numerous, more determined to reclaim what they see as their rightful territory. The displays throughout the ship lit up with tactical information, energy signatures approaching from intergalactic space, projected arrival times, estimated fleet strengths that made even the most optimistic scenarios look grim. Alone, no single species can stand against them. Ha-Nul continued. Together, we represent something new in this galaxy's history, a true alliance of equals, united not by conquest but by choice. That unity is our greatest weapon and our only hope. Taemin activated his own communication system. Dr. Kim, this is Commander Taemin. What exactly are you asking of us? Nothing you haven't already given, Ha-Nul replied. Your trust in each other, your willingness to work together despite differences, your commitment to building something better than what came before. She paused. We're asking you to be exactly what you already are, the children who grew up to be better than their parents. The observation lounge filled with his senior staff as they gathered to hear his decision. These people had served with him for years, had become a family of sorts through shared dangers and discoveries. Whatever choice he made would affect not just them, but every person in the hegemony. The council will meet in 4 hours, he said finally. They'll hear the evidence, debate the options, and eventually reach a decision. But I don't think we can wait for politics to run its course. What are you suggesting, sir? Captain Sora asked. I'm suggesting that some decisions transcend rank and protocol, Taemin replied. Dr. Kim, if the Eternal Dawn were to formally request assignment to the Combined Defense Force, what would that mean for my crew? It would mean working alongside species you've never met, using technology you're still learning to understand and facing an enemy unlike anything in your experience, Ha-Nul said honestly. It would mean leaving behind the comfortable certainties of your current life and embracing something entirely new. Taemin looked around at his crew. Captain Sora met his eyes and nodded slightly. Scholar Minho straightened in his chair with something that looked like anticipation. Engineer Yuna was already studying technical specifications on her display, her expression bright with curiosity. Even Military Commander Sang-ho seemed resigned to the inevitable. It would also mean, Hanul continued, standing alongside the beings who guided your development with pride, not as students following teachers, but as equals facing a common threat. It would mean taking your place as full members of the galactic community we've all been building together. Dr. Kim, Taemin said formally, the crew of the Eternal Dawn requests permission to join the Combined Defense Force. Permission granted. Commander, Hanul replied, and there was something like joy in her voice. Welcome to the real war. The displays around them shifted, showing not just Earth's hidden fleets, but installations throughout the galaxy coming online. Weapons platforms that had disguised themselves as asteroids for millennia. Defense networks hidden in the structure of space stations and orbital habitats. And ships, thousands of ships from dozens of species, all emerging from concealment to take their places in humanity's greatest gamble. How long do we have? Captain Sora asked, studying the tactical displays. 7 years until the first scouts arrive, Hanul replied. 15 years until the main force reaches our borders. Not long enough to build everything we need, but long enough to finish what we started. Through the viewing window, Earth continued its ancient rotation, looking as peaceful and primitive as it had when they first arrived. But now, Taemin could see it for what it truly was. Not just another world to be catalogued and governed, but the heart of a vast conspiracy of hope that had been working for thousands of years to prepare for this moment. Dr. Kim, he said quietly, thank you. For what, Commander? For believing we could grow up to be worthy of what you taught us. The connection closed with a soft chime, leaving the observation lounge in contemplative silence. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always had, but everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate civilizations struggling to understand each other. It was a family, reunited at last, preparing to face the darkness, together. And for the first time since the Devourers had been detected approaching, Commander Taemin felt something that might have been hope.